So, dear friends, I am delighted to share with you this extraordinary experience that my husband and I had on the way home from our retreat at Plum Village in France. And I want to put it in context first so that, yeah, just to give you a sense, it was a very big retreat. Uh, so there are about 700 of us there, not all in one site. They have three different hamlets, three sites at Plum Village. And so they had 700 people there physically, and then they had like about 800 online because it was kind of like a hybrid retreat. So that's a lot of people practicing together. And when I say I want to put this story in context, it's like the energy that was generated from 1,500 people practicing together was, obviously pretty phenomenal. And I also want to give you a little bit of context in terms of my own personal kind of journey, if you like, of what I had been working with. So part of what I had been working with on retreat was the issue of feeling safe in the world. And this may be an issue for many of you. It's not that I go around, that I walk around on a day-to-day basis feeling in danger. But there's obviously, like a much deeper, more subtle level at which uh, yeah, on that I don't feel totally safe. Or let me rephrase that I didn't in the past. I didn't feel totally safe in the world. Um, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. The trauma that I experienced growing up, the fact that both my parents were born literally within kind of like months of the beginning of the Second World War, and how terrifying that must have been for their mothers. And then my own mother was evacuated very young, without her mother, because their hometown was Southampton, which is a port on the south of England that was being bombed. So there's a lot of reasons why I might have this particular kind of issue to work through. And so now the other thing that I want to, before I tell you the story, I also need to tell you a few little things about myself, because then the story will make sense. Okay, so these are details. These are important little details, actually. So remember them when I'm telling you the story. Well, I'm sure I'll remind you anyway. So the first thing to know is that the actual retreat, the name of the retreat was Love is Freedom, which very beautiful title for the retreat. The retreat was very focused on the environment, actually. It was organized by the Earth Holders Sangha within Plum Village. And so that's the first thing. The other thing to know is that the only dog that I've ever had was a Pyrenean mountain dog, and she was beautiful. She was quite large. Pyrenean mountain dogs are big, and she was totally white. She didn't have the usual kind of grey markings that Pyrenean mountain dogs tend to have, which is their kind of camouflage for the rock. And I called her Bianca, maybe not a very original name for a white dog. The other thing to know is that when I was teaching at university in the northwest of England, I lived in a place called Skelmersdale for about 5 years. Okay, and the other thing to know is that when my husband and I first moved to Spain about 5 years ago, we had an electric car. We had a Zoe, a Renault Zoe. And that's another whole story in itself, how I managed, because I was so keen to get one of these things, despite the kind of price point of them. And it's a whole story about how we managed. But anyway, for 1 year, we had this beautiful electric car. Unfortunately, the steering wheel was on the wrong side for Spain. So we did have to sell her. But so that's the other thing to know, is that we had a Zoe. Okay, so sorry, this is a long preamble. Thank you for bearing with me. So what happened? We're driving home from France, And so we left the retreat on the Friday. So this is the Saturday. So we've climbed up high into the Pyrenean mountains. So this kind of really steep, winding climb up to what in the past would have been, I guess, a pass, like a mountain pass. Now there's a tunnel. I mean, there are quite a few tunnels dotted along the Pyrenees. This particular one was the Bielsa tunnel. And and this particular tunnel had traffic lights, okay, to kind of regulate the flow of the traffic, because it's a long tunnel. So we got up there and the traffic lights were red. And we were the first, in front of these traffic lights. So we turned the engine off to wait. And it was, it was quite a long wait. And then when when my husband was driving at the time, when he went to start the engine, the car wouldn't start. Okay. So obviously he tried 2 or 3 times. Dead, nothing. So I then got out and started kind of waving people on, because by then, the traffic lights are green. And then we, once everybody had kind of gone and it was clear, there were some walkers, because there was a little car park the other side where people were going for some beautiful hikes up into the mountains. And there was this group of walkers, of hikers, that had kind of just got back to their vehicle. So I went over. Luckily, I speak French. So at this point, we're still in France. And I said, look, can anybody help us kind of like push the car off the road? So we got this whole team of people helping us to push the car just safely off. There was another small parking area, the side that we were on. So, so we've broken down in the middle of nowhere, high up in the Pyrenees. And so we thought, okay, well, we'll wait for the engine to cool down. And so we thought, well, we'll go for a walk while we're waiting, these beautiful hiking trails. So we headed off up the mountain. And the first thing that we saw was a big panel saying that this particular hike was called the Chemin de Liberté. Okay, now Chemin de Liberté means path of freedom. And in fact, what it was that a resistance fighter during the Second World War had kind of gone, had got away from occupied France and had used that particular route to get to Spain. And there was, I won't go into the whole details of the story. But obviously that immediately kind of reminded me of the name of the retreat, love is freedom. And here we have the Chemin de Liberté, the path of freedom, the path to freedom. And in fact, my husband and I had immediately got a sense of, like, okay, so this is no big deal. It's like, okay, so this has happened. In fact, I think we actually thought it was quite funny. Well, certainly at first. So, but we did, I can't quite remember at what point, but at a certain point, we had a sense of the freedom that we had chosen not to react by getting stressed or anxious or fearful or even annoyed and angry, because I'll tell you some of the details that unfolded could easily have kind of triggered that. But we had kind of chosen to respond, and we both experienced this moment of freedom. It's like, wow, it really is, we have the freedom to choose how we deal with situations, how we respond. And it was an experiential learning for both of us. It's like, wow, this is what freedom means. Certainly in the kind of Plum Village context, how they, in terms of the practice. So we start this hike up the mountain, and then we come to another panel, which is all about the Pyrenean mountain dogs. And if you come across a Pyrenean mountain dog that is, looking after its flock of sheep, please put your dog on the lead. But anyway, here's this thing. It's like Pyrenean mountain dog. It's like, wow, here's my Bianca. And so already we were starting to get a sense of, the universe saying, this is okay, what is happening for a reason. At this point, we didn't yet know what it was, but this is okay. It definitely felt like synchronicity, like signs and symbols from the universe that all was well. So we go for our beautiful hike, these beautiful waterfalls and things, and we come back down, and 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 then by this time we're quite hot, okay, because it's kind of like the middle of the day. It's like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. There's no shade there, and there's this beautiful pool where the water has come down in the waterfalls down from the mountain. It's kind of gathered in a beautiful crystal clear pool. So we thought, oh well, we'll have a dip. We'll have a little dip. I only had to paddle in it to discover that it was so cold, it was making my feet hurt. So I didn't actually go in, but my husband did. He's really into Wim Hof and swimming in the sea in the middle of winter and cold showers in the middle of winter. So he went in and had a little swim. I mean, he wasn't in there for long, but there was this young couple there with a beautiful dog, a Dalmatian, actually, for those of you that are into dogs. And so the young guy, seeing my husband go in, thought, "Oh, that looks nice, looks fun." So he went in and also had a quick dip. Anyway, we sort of got chatting with them, and he was English and she was Spanish, and because of course we're right on the Spanish border, even though we're in France, and then. And they kind of went back to their vehicle, and that was that. And then we tried to start the car, and she still wouldn't start. There was absolutely no way. And this, by now I'm kind of doing a bit of Google search, although it was tricky. The signal up there wasn't great. So I was trying to, because we thought it was either starter motor or battery. We had, to be fair, we had difficulties earlier in the year. In the winter, we'd had trouble with her other car starting in the mornings, but she'd been fine for months, and so we'd kind of completely forgotten about it. But the mechanic at the time had said he wasn't sure whether it was the battery or the starter motor. When he checked everything seemed to be fine. That was back in the winter. So we kind of had an inkling of what to look, and I'm finding out that you can tap like a starter motor. If you tap with a kind of heavy kind of piece of metal, like a hammer or something, you can kind of dislodge. You can actually kind of help to get the car started. So I'm finding out all of this. Of course, we didn't have a hammer. We didn't have any kind of piece of suitable metal. So we went over to this couple. And we asked them actually if they had any jump leads, which they didn't. And then, chatting a little bit further. Okay, I'll give you one guess as to where the English guy was from. Okay, bearing in mind what I told you about where I lived. He was from Skelmersdale. Okay, so the universe had kind of sent us somebody from Skelmersdale. We're in the middle of nowhere, high up in the Pyrenees, and it's like, you're being looked after. We're sending you reinforcements. We're sending you, even though they didn't have jump leads and they couldn't help us and they kind of went on their way. It just felt very comforting and reassuring that the universe had our back. So the next thing that happens, so meanwhile, I have been in touch with the insurance company. We had 24-hour roadside assistance. So, we knew that the insurance company, would get that sorted. The complication was that it's a Spanish insurance company. And despite the fact that we live in the EU with freedom of movement, it apparently is illegal for a Spanish tow truck to tow a vehicle on French territory. So we were kind of up against that. And so the insurance company had said to me, well, look, the quickest and easiest way is actually if you're going to phone the police, the French police. So I kind of, it's the kind of thing that normally I would really hesitate to do, because it's not like we had a major emergency on our hands. The insurance company, it turned out later, could have kind of dealt with it without me kind of phoning the police. I think I've only ever phoned an emergency number twice in my entire life, and that was the second time. So, um, so I phoned the French police, and they put me in touch with a French tow truck company. And basically, this guy, so here's me, thank goodness that I speak good French. This guy was just not interested. Poor guy. He obviously, it was by this time, it was kind of probably about 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. He'd obviously had a long day. He still had two call outs to do, of kind of like roadside assistant jobs to do. In fact, when I spoke with him, he was actually at the roadside anyway. And he just wasn't interested, and I was kind of like trying to persuade him. And then in the end I thought, you know what, if this guy doesn't really want to do it, then, I mean, I could have persevered, but he was also, uh yeah, I don't need to go into the details of it, but that was a situation where actually I could have got really frustrated and really irritated. um, but I didn't, thankfully. So then the next thing that happens, okay, so by this time I've decided that, we're tired. We're not going to manage to get anybody out to help us and rescue us this day on Saturday. Luckily, our car is like a camper car. We've kind of like done a little bit of it's not exactly a conversion, but we've got a very comfortable mattress. We had been sleeping in the car anyway. We had plenty of food. We had plenty of water. And so I thought, look, we decided to just have, a night's sleep and rest, and then the next morning to start again, for me to go back to the Spanish insurance company and say, look, there's got to be another way of doing this. So the next thing that happens is that, what vehicle should pull up. And again, I'll give you one guess as to what vehicle should pull up. And bearing in mind that we're high up in the Pyrenees, in the middle of nowhere, and there aren't many charging points, electric vehicle charging points in that part of the world. And it's quite a steep climb. It would have used quite a lot of power for an electric vehicle to get up there, even though on the way back down it would be regenerating. The way they work is that the battery gets charged back up when you go down. So once they got through the tunnel in Spain and were going downhill, they would have had a great time. Anyway, yeah, it was a Zoe that pulled up. It was a Zoe, a lovely young couple. They pulled up right next to us, and I had a little chat and said, oh, we had a Zoe, and they were asking me about the charging points in Spain, because they were French and heading to Spain. And so, yeah. So, I mean, this is, by this time, my husband, when these things happen, it's almost like, on the one hand, it's like our jaw is dropping open, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, oh yeah, of course. The universe is just communicating with us. It's telling us that it's looking after us. Everything is fine. They've got our back. They're sending us, one thing after another to just help us be kind of reassured. And remember also that I had been working with this theme of feeling safe in the world. And so, overall, the message for me was, once I'd kind of taken stock and digested it, and kind of, I kind of felt, we are totally and utterly safe and supported at all times, really. But we don't necessarily notice the messages from the universe, or maybe it was because our vibration was so high, our frequency was so high after the retreat, that it's easier to kind of connect with source in that way, and for the universe to support us in that way. And, for those of you that have trained with me, I think this really reinforces the message of just how important it is to keep our vibration, our frequency as high as possible at all times, so that we can kind of really connect with the divine and kind of really work at this level. And so, I just came away from the whole experience. I mean, there's more. I mean, I've already spent quite a while explaining this to you, so I don't want. There was a bit more. A lovely guy who actually got underneath the bonnet of our car with a big wrench and started tapping our starter motor to see if he could get it going, which didn't work. But he was very kind to offer. So eventually, the next day, the insurance company did actually manage to send us a tow truck from Spain. It's like an hour away for the tow truck company to come from the nearest garage. And and in fact, he didn't have to tow us. He managed to get us going. And then, yeah, and there's more to the story because there was this awful moment halfway home when we stopped to have a rest. Because by this time, the engine was starting and stopping absolutely fine. We stopped to have a rest, and the engine wouldn't start. And it was like, oh my goodness, we're going to have to call the insurance company and roadside assistance again. But actually we both kind of tuned in, we kind of did a little meditation, did a big prayer, and she started, and we managed to get home. And then once we got home, then the mechanic fitted, and we've got this fantastic mechanic locally in our village. He comes out to the house, and he got us a new battery and got us sorted. But what a fabulous story. I feel, I hope I'm not just biased, but and that fact that we are totally safe and supported by the universe at all times, that's not just a lesson for me and for my husband and I, it's a lesson for all of us. If we can just trust that and kind of lean into it, and I guess we have to kind of really experience it. It has to be an experiential learning. And that's also why, with all the training, all the courses and everything I offer, I really like to focus on the experiential. And you'll see that with my books as well. It's all about the experiential, despite my academic background. And maybe because of my academic background, which was all kind of like intellectual and kind of left brain and in the head. So I hope that is inspiring for you. I hope that maybe you get to experience something similar, or that you can take something from this to kind of, just as a reminder, to kind of, especially in times of challenge and difficulty. So thank you so much for listening. Go well, and bye for now.